Before the sun had even begun to rise over the Bronx, an unprecedented multi-agency operation was already underway. The target? A network of undocumented criminals, some of whom had been using New York City's sanctuary policies as a shield from justice. The operation, executed with surgical precision, resulted in the capture of 20 individuals, including a high-ranking member of a notorious Venezuelan gang, a man many believed was untouchable. His name? Anderson Zano Pacho, a 25-year-old fugitive with a rap sheet that spanned multiple states. Authorities had been tracking him for months. He was linked to violent crimes, including an armed invasion of an apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado. Surveillance footage from that attack showed him and his heavily armed crew storming the building like a military unit. He was a ghost, disappearing into the maze of New York's underground criminal world, until now. ICE agents moved in silently before dawn, hitting multiple locations simultaneously. Pacho was caught completely off guard. His plan had been simple: disappear into the crowd, take advantage of New York City's lack of background checks for asylum shelters, and continue operating from the shadows. But the federal government had other plans. The raid sent shockwaves through the Bronx. Residents woke up to flashing lights and the sight of armored officers flooding their streets. Some were relieved. Others were stunned to learn that they had been living side by side with one of the country's most wanted criminals. "I was about to call ICE myself," one neighbor admitted, watching agents escort Pacho into a waiting vehicle. "I had no idea, but I'm glad it's happening." This operation wasn't just about one man. In total, 20 undocumented immigrants were arrested, 12 with extensive criminal records, including robbery, assault, and weapons charges. The remaining 8 had entered the country illegally, but had yet to be tied to any violent activity. Federal authorities made their stance clear. Anyone who enters the country unlawfully is subject to deportation, and those who exploit the system to commit crimes would be their top priority. But not everyone welcomed the crackdown. Activists decried the raids, calling them an overreach and an attack on vulnerable communities. "They're trying to instill fear," one advocate argued. "This is just the beginning." Yet, for many in the Bronx, fear had been a daily reality long before federal agents arrived. The same gang Pacho belonged to had been laying down roots across the city, using asylum shelters as recruitment grounds and safe havens. Without background checks, gang members were able to secure housing just steps away from families with children. Some had even begun smuggling weapons into these shelters, turning them into operational bases for their criminal enterprises. Residents of these neighborhoods had seen firsthand how crime flourished under New York City's sanctuary policies. They had watched as shoplifters and thieves walked free, as violent offenders avoided jail time, and as entire communities were left vulnerable to criminal elements. The message was clear: law-abiding citizens were being asked to coexist with those who had no respect for the law, and the consequences? Devastating. Just last year, members of the same Venezuelan gang were caught on camera attacking NYPD officers in Times Square, only to be set free hours later. New York's leniency had turned it into a criminal's paradise, a place where fugitives could evade justice while enjoying government-provided benefits. But now, the tides were turning. With new federal leadership in place, Homeland Security was back in full force, determined to reclaim the streets. These raids, controversial or not, were a statement. Lawlessness would no longer be tolerated. For the residents of the Bronx, the question remains: will this be the beginning of a safer city, or just another chapter in a battle between crime and enforcement? One thing is certain: the fight is far from over.